So friends, our second lesson today is taken from the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. Now as they went on their way, he entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Well, I don't know how many of you have ever thought about going on a diet or, doing something about your finances. And one of the things that happens, whenever people start to talk about that, one of the most common things you're asked to do is to begin by journaling what you're already doing. So one of the first things to do, we talk about diet, is, all right, write down, go for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, and write down every single thing you eat. Write it all down. Write every morsel down, and then we'll take a look at it. Talking about finances, talking about budgeting, they go, okay, let's start by just writing down everything you spend. Not just the big stuff, but the little stuff. Write down everything, and then at the end of a couple weeks, we will add it up, and then we will see what you actually do. Because one of the things that they want you to start with is an actual realistic understanding of what it is that you're actually doing. How much are you actually eating? How much are you actually spending? Is it going toward the things that you think it's going toward or not? Well, I want you to keep that in mind as we go over this fairly short, fairly simple story that simply has Jesus visiting a person's home. All right? And we tend to impute into this story more than the details that are actually explicitly given. We know that this is Martha's house. All right? That's all it says. It says it's Martha's house. Now, we don't actually know what her relationship is with her sister. It doesn't even necessarily say that Mary lives there or anything like that, but we tend to presume somehow we get this image that Martha's the older sister and, because it's her house, and we don't know how she got it. Maybe she's a widow because, it wouldn't have been that common for women to own property, and so maybe she's a widow, and that's why it's her house. And then there's Mary. We just know that Martha has a house, Mary is there, and suddenly there is company. All right, so Jesus shows up, and Jesus, he's a bit of a rock star. He doesn't travel alone, and so he's got his entourage. And so Jesus comes in, and suddenly you've got Jesus and his followers who've come over, and they are there. And so Martha feels a need to do what you would normally do, which is to feed them, to be hospitable. And there's all the other things that you have to do as well. And so she's kind of scurrying about, and it says that Martha was distracted by her many tasks. And we've all been there, right? We've all been there. How many of you have hosted a party, and you were so busy hosting the party that you didn't enjoy the party, right? Okay, and you may have been the only one who didn't enjoy the party. In fact, I know how busy it gets hosting things. Can I give you a little secret? You remember Felicia at the beginning in the announcement said that at the end of service we're going to be handing out these ice pops, and they're Outshine bars. They're nice. They're the ones with the no artificial food coloring, stuff like that. They're really good. So we're handing them out. Now, why are we handing them out today? And you're like, well, because it's really hot. Well, that's half the story. It's not that we saw that the forecast was that it was going to be 100 degrees today, and one of us said, let's be nice and run down to Costco and buy a bunch of them. No, that's not what happened. We bought these for the picnic a few weeks ago and forgot to give them out. So that is the true story of why you're getting them today, is that a few weeks ago we bought them for the picnic. We had 5 cases of them sitting in the freezers, and that afternoon we're cleaning everything up, and Felicia turns to me and says, do you know what we forgot to do? Somehow in between the grilling of the hamburgers and the hot dogs and the boiling of the corn and the slicing of the watermelon, we forgot that in the freezer, 5 cases of Outshine bars. So today is the day we get to clean our freezers out. Because if we weren't giving them out over the summer, you'd be getting them at Christmas caroling. So we had to get them out, and so that's why it happens. But that happens all the time, right? That happens to us all the time. How many times? I mean, I can't count the number of times I forgot to serve something. Got so busy in doing everything that I actually even forgot to serve something that I had planned to serve, and I find it in the refrigerator afterwards. I mean, this happens. You get so busy. So you can kind of understand Martha being too busy to focus on what she's doing. But I want to talk about this word distracted for a second. So when it talks about this word distracted, the Greek for this word has a very specific meaning. It's this word named peristao, and it means this. It means to be pulled away from a reference point. Okay? And so you've got something that is supposed to be center, you've got something that is supposed to have your focus, and you get pulled away, and this is the distraction. And the funny thing about this story is that not only has Martha been pulled away from the reference point, she wants Jesus to pull Mary away. All right? She's like, all right, come on, Jesus, help me out here. And I'm being pulled away. And Jesus is the one who basically remembers what the reference point is supposed to be. So Jesus remembers, no. Jesus is like, wait, you've got this backwards, Martha. You've got this kind of backwards. Yes, you're being pulled away, but I am not going to then compound the issue by taking Mary and pulling her away as well. I'm not going to do that. See, because Mary was at the reference point. Mary was there. It says she had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. That was the reference point. That was the focal point. That is what was supposed to be happening. It's kind of the point of those diet audits or budget audits that we do of our lives. It's to sit down afterwards and take a look at it and say, are you really focused in those areas of your life on the things that you should be focused on? Are you eating what you ought to be eating? Is the calorie budget that you have actually being devoted to the things that it ought to be? Is the money that you have being spent on the things it's supposed to be? When we look at it realistically, when we look at it in total, really, are things focused in the direction where they ought to be focused? And the question is, would an examination of your life, if we look at 24/7, we look at 168 hours of your week, would an examination of what you do conclude that you were focused on what was most important? Were you spending your week with your life centered around that reference point, or did you spend your week being pulled away from it? See, the fact that Mary was supposed to be listening to Jesus is the obvious point of this story, but in a way that kind of makes it a little extreme, because, we don't have Jesus here to listen to directly, right? I mean, it's not like he's here visiting the house. I mean, if Jesus were coming here and said, I'm going to be here Tuesday night, we'd kind of say, all right, y'all need to be here. Okay? Be here no matter what you're doing. Cancel it, change your plans, be here, listen, all right? But really, if you think about your life and you think about everything in your life, are you truly focused on the things that God would have you be focused on? Is your life, are you putting an appropriate amount of time around the things that ought to be at the center, or are you spending way more of the time than you maybe think you are on things that aren't at the center? The same way we find that out about our diets, or we find that out about our budgets, that we're putting far more of the resources, because we're kind of dribbling it away, into things that aren't where they ought to be. So let's look at what Jesus says to Martha in reply, and I want to talk about it just for a couple minutes, because when Jesus says to him in our translation, remember, the Presbyterian Church, we traditionally use this version of the Bible called the New Revised Standard Version, okay? And this is all about translation, and there are always choices that are made, and they're not necessarily choices that you can universally say are the best, right? There's always arguments, disagreements about it. And so we use the New Revised Standard Version, and he says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things, and there's need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part. I'm not sure that some of these words are the best words to have translated. For example, the word here that gets translated as distracted is a completely different Greek word than the one we just talked about. It's not peristao. It's a completely different word. So I wanted to just show you a different translation into English. It's called the New King James Version. It's basically based on the King James Version of the Bible, but updated with the language into modern times. And I think there were some perhaps more beneficial choices made in the words. And in that translation, what Jesus says is, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things. But one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part. He doesn't use the comparative. He doesn't say that it's better than the other. Mary has chosen the good part. Mary has chosen the good thing, and I think troubled is much more accurate to the word that's there in the Greek text than distracted. And one of the things that's really important about this statement of worried and troubled is that there's nothing in those words that implies that those things are completely unimportant or frivolous. Okay? See, Martha is trying to be hospitable. And hospitality was not frivolous. Hospitality was a serious obligation of the time, okay? Sometimes when we think about distractions, we think about things that are really a waste of time, okay? Like a distraction would be, last night I should have been working on my sermon, but I'm watching Netflix, all right? That's a distraction, okay? As we often think of it. But no, this is not so much a matter of distraction as in frivolous or distraction as in wasteful, all right? These distractions are themselves serious things. They're important things. They're not unimportant. It's just that they were not the most important thing to be focused on in that situation. See, a lot of times our distractions are serious. They're not frivolous. All right? Our distractions are in the list of things that you ought to be putting some time toward, that you ought to be paying attention to, except that what's happened is that we've gotten the priorities out of whack. Give an example. When I was in college, so I was in college, and Princeton's basketball team historically has had some great teams. It's one of the few intercollegiate sports that it really competes incredibly, with big name schools. Okay, but it's not a factory of professional players. In fact, quite frankly, it's been more of a factory of NBA executives than actual on-the-court personnel, all right? But when I was there, I forget whether it was my freshman or my sophomore year, there was a guy on the team. I didn't know him, but it was just reported in the school paper. He was the backup center, okay? So he's the backup center on a team that is not, this is not, a big-name basketball powerhouse school. He's the backup center, but it's a Division I varsity team, so he's got to be pretty good. He's got to be a pretty decent player. And in the middle of the season, he quits. Says, I'm done. Quits the team. He was the backup center. He quits the team in the middle of the season. Why? He got a B+ on a midterm. His goal was law school. His goal was a top law school. And he said, I think the amount of time that I'm spending on basketball is hurting my chances at getting the straight A's that I'm trying to maintain because I want to get into a top law school. So he quit the team. Now, when I'm, 20, that seemed weird. Okay? As a 20-year-old, that seemed really, really strange. We're like, he did what? A B+? And he quit the team? What? Now, at my present age, it's the age where you don't need FaceApp to tell you what you look like as an old man. At my present age, it does not seem like a bad decision at all. at my present age, wow, was he smart. Wow, was he smart. Wow, did he make a wise decision, a decision that was wise beyond his years, to know what was actually most important and choose what was most important over something that is not bad at all. There is nothing wrong with playing varsity basketball Division I level. There is nothing wrong with that until it got to the point where it was interfering with what was even more important. And he understood that he needed to make a choice, and he chose for what was truly important. And you can look at that and say, wow, but think about how all the hours he had spent in his youth practicing. Of course, he didn't need to practice being 6'10". That kind of just happened. But, you think of all the hours he spent practicing, all the time he spent becoming good at it, all of that gone. But you see, that's one of the things that happens. Sometimes our distractions are actually kind of difficult. They're distracting us. They're taking our time because they're not the easy things like just turning on the television. They're distractions that are luring us into things that actually take some skill and some work. I was thinking about this the other day. How many of you ever played darts? Anyone ever play like real darts, like competitive sort of darts? Okay, so you understand that you look at a dartboard, you look at a target, and your instinct is to think, okay, where you really want is to get as close to the middle as possible. But there's these things on that dartboard. You know that ring in the middle there going around that's really narrow? You know what that is, right? How many of you know what that is? That's the triple score. If you landed in there, you get 3 times the score of the wedge that you're in. And that outer ring that's just on the edge of not scoring at all, that outer ring, you get it in there and you get double the points. All right, that's the double ring. You get double the points. And actually, a really good dart player isn't just going for that middle bull, for the inner bull. They are going also for the triple score, the double score. When you look at that, it's actually kind of hard to hit that. You can imagine, right? It takes some real skill to be able to hit the triple, hit the double at will. And you kind of need to, because in darts, the way it works is your last throw that puts you over the threshold has to be a double. Okay? Or the inner bull if we're going to get technical, but we don't need to quite have a competition level seminar about it. But your final score, you're aiming for that double. And sometimes that's what happens in our lives, is that we put a lot of our energy, because it can take great skill and focus to excel at what's actually a distraction. Sometimes we spend a lot of time getting better at something that's not the most important thing to be getting better at. One of the things that I participate in is groups on Facebook and stuff about church communications, all right? Some people don't like to think about churches and marketing and stuff like that. My answer is sort of get over it. But we're having a discussion this week about email open rates. And yes, we send you those emails every week. All right, and you get those emails from us, and yes, we know who opened it, and we know what time of day you opened it, and we know what percentage of the people we send it to open it. We know all those things, and we're having a discussion about it. And it was kind of interesting. We're all talking about how to increase our open rates, how to get more people to read these things. And let me tell you something that's actually really, really common. All right, so we get a fairly typical open rate for churches, which is somewhere between 35, 40% or so of the people actually read the email. All right? Now, here's a common frustration. Common frustration is this, and churches across the board talk about it. Like our family ministries, Felicia puts together an email every week, and this is not a matter of it going to people who don't have kids so they don't pay attention to it. That's a targeted list. It only goes to parents of kids in our church school program, okay? So unless you're a parent of a kid who's between, birth to college age, you don't get that email, all right? And across the board, we suffer the same thing as other churches. It's got the lowest open rate of any email we send, and that email often has tips on how to be a better parent. It often contains links to articles, blog posts. It contains tips about what we're talking about in church school so that you can have a conversation with your children that reinforces what we're trying to teach them, okay? If you paid attention to those emails, you wouldn't have needed to see my bag of marshmallows to know that we were talking about gentleness today. You would have opened it and seen it, and yet across the board, churches report that's the lowest open rate. I've seen churches that said they even stopped bothering to send it because their parents won't open it. Why? Parents are busy. We know they're busy. And yet, isn't being a better parent really important? Are you letting the busyness of parenting be a distraction from the most important thing, was to actually try and get better at it? Because it's hard. Why do we put so many resources into it? Because it is not easy. And I've never done it, and I can tell it's hard. I'm just looking from the outside going in, going, that's hard. People need to look at it. And yet, what gets their attention? You might be wondering, what guarantees that you will get at least 70% of the people to open the email, maybe 80%? A subject line that indicates that the message is telling you that someone died. Yep. If the subject line indicates that you are announcing the death of a member, 75% open rate guaranteed. Someday, you will get one where it opens up and says, nobody died, but we really needed you to read this. We just haven't used that yet because you can only go to that well so often, you know? But we were joking about it online, you know, we're joking and like, really? Everyone wants to know who died. Not nearly as interested in maybe getting better at raising the next generation of people coming behind us. Are you spending your time getting better at the things that are most important? Are you spending your time getting better at your primary relationships? Are you spending your time getting better at being a family? Are you looking at your year and understanding your week or your year in the right set of priorities? I mean, so if we look at your life, does it look like it's prioritized to the good part? Does it look like it's prioritized to the things that matter? You know, one of the things we think about summer as a time, right? There are a lot of people who spend time, they tell me they're going to be away for a family reunion or something like that, or they're away and they're off having a cookout or a picnic, or they're off having a vacation. They're doing all these wonderful family things. And understand something? That's the focus. Those relationships are the most important thing in your life. That's not the distraction. It's the focus. You know, one of the things that happens is our Jewish friends do such a better job of keeping Sabbath, all right, of understanding Sabbath and practicing Sabbath. But the most important thing that our Jewish friends understand is that Sabbath is the focal point of the week, all right? How often do you hear people say something like, I need my weekend so I can be refreshed to go to work? What have you done if you say that? If you say that, what you're saying is the focus of your week is your work. It's not. The point of rest is not so you can work. I mean, imagine what that says about our life, about our society, if we go, no, we only give you a break so that you can work. It's like a person saying, you know what, yeah, we let our plow horse drink water so that it doesn't keel over and die in the fields. That is not what we were intended to be. The focus of your week is the time with your loved ones. The focus of your week is your time at rest, enjoying the blessings of what God has given us. The focus of your week is not your work. You work so that you can have that time, right? I mean, what do our Jewish friends do the day before Sabbath or the day of Sabbath? They spend their time preparing meals and getting them ready so that they're able to just eat them on the Sabbath and not cook. They understand, they work. Because the focus is the rest. It's not that you rest so that you can work. If you think about your life, is it prioritized to what's important? Or have you somehow inverted the priorities so that they're not bad, they're just flipped? Because it happens with this story all the time, and boy, I am the number one most guilty of this of anybody. That when I read this story, I'm with Martha. That when I read this story, I am like, Martha, you are so right. Mary, you are so lazy. But it's taken a deeper understanding of faith, a deeper understanding of what God wants for me to work on getting it right. For me to work on understanding that when Jesus says Mary has chosen the good part and it's not going to be taken away from her, that I don't just go, yeah, I hear that, but that I actually try to begin to own it. That Mary had it right and Martha had it wrong. But the fact that it's so easy for us to hear this story and side with Martha tells us how easy it has been for the reversed priorities of the world to change the way we think, to change the way we look at the world. It's so easy for us to think that we were built to work and we rest so we can work more, as opposed to understanding that wasn't what we were built to do. That we were built to stay focused on what really matters. And I pray that that's what we'll do, not just over the summer, but all year round. Amen.